Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Reinventing Finance. Before we jump into the episode and we'll introduce my lovely co-host and our guest, we wanted to give a big shout out to ITC Europe and tell you about an exciting event that Ron and I will certainly gonna be attending. If you don't have it in your calendar, Insure to Connect Europe 2026 happening on May 28th, 29 in Barcelona in the lovely country of Spain.
Exactly. It's a senior level conference for the entire European insurance insurtech community, for insurers, brokers, MGAs, startups, investors. They all come together for strategic contents and for what I like most, real meetings and next level networking.
Yeah, I mean, I can connect. I've been a big fan since ITC from its beginning, way back when in Barcelona. And what I always liked was you have really interesting main stage events if you want to get what people are willing to share about where the industry is heading and what they're doing. But you have panels, workshops, round tables. You obviously have expos where your typical tech entrepreneurs and solutions are being presented, and it's just a really good place to connect and to mingle. And from personal experience, it is still the best EU event.
Can only confirm this. So if you're shaping strategy, if you're leading innovation, if you're building the future of insurance in Europe, then this event is made for you, and definitely the Barcelona one. Spots are limited.
And check out their website, europe.insurtechconnect.com to register. Hope to see you here. Coming to today's episode, Jordi, thank you for being so patient with us. Thank you for taking the time. And before we jump into today's topic, which is around embedded insurance, activation, etc. Why don't you briefly introduce yourselves, your company, and as it relates to this conversation?
Sure. So thanks for inviting me to this conversation. Happy to learn about the industry, and I'll be also in Barcelona. This time is closer to my hometown, so we'll make our best to be there. So just to introduce myself, I'm Jordi Pagés. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Weecover. More than 30 years in the insurance industry. Since I finalized my studies, I had a very clear idea about working in the insurance industry. I learned as an actuary, and I started my career like an actuary in a large corporation in the insurance industry. So I spent most of my time in operational transformation, also in the technical side. And in the later stage, I was heading distribution for more than 15 years in a large company, in a multinational company. And I had the opportunity also to oversee various countries, so to get clear learning about how distribution was made. And this was a great input for me to really understand what needs to be done in terms of founding the company. So related to Weecover is an insurtech company. It was born in the year 2020, so in the middle of the COVID. So we realized and we reinforced the idea that digital was coming to the insurance industry as well. And the purpose of the company was basically to make the insurance world easier for the end customers. And although the proposition was related to B2B2C, in the end, what we wanted was to make clear that why insurance needed to be so different than other service contracts and why the onboarding process was so complex. So this was the aim of the company when it was born, and then since that that milestone, we really evolved the company and we completed most of the proposition that we wanted to do.
And just so why is it so complicated? Why is it so different?
That's the question. Look, when we're hiring someone in the company, and you may know, mainly in the IT department,
Sure.
I used to ask them, what do you think about the insurance industry? And the answer is always the same. It's complex. It's complex. Why it's complex? Why insurance is that complex? So in the end, it's about providing a contract, about servicing someone if something happens. So in the end, of course, there is a lot of technical rules that we need to follow, and a lot of regulation and compliance that we need to follow as well. But based on the new technologies that we are all applying, this can be much more easier than it has been in the past. And this was clearly the purpose of the company. So basically, what I learned managing distribution was the timing when the IDD was launched, and that was allowing many companies also to distribute insurances. Companies that before that were not even considering to distribute insurance, and those companies, they had a very different profile than the ones that were distributing insurances before. So, I would say at that time, basically agents, brokers, and we might say car dealers, motor manufacturers, and bancassurance were distributing insurances. They had ad hoc systems to do that. They had their operational processes fully integrated in their core systems. But now for these new companies that were now likely to be new distributors in the insurance ecosystem, there was nothing. And we realized that those companies were really orphans in terms of the proposition that they needed if they wanted to go to the market. So basically started the conversation with them. They really had three specific requests to work in the insurance industry. First one was technology. They didn't want to go through a heavy investment. So if you bring something that really can apply with my system and we can integrate each other in a seamless way, it's going to work. If I need to go through heavy investment just to distribute insurance, this is not my core business. So let's discuss about that. So this was the first point. Second point was about the insurance product. Many of the insurance products were really developed, defined, and thought to be distributed through agents and brokers, in the underwriting processes and rules, but also thought for that channel in particular. So when you go to someone else that they don't have the same expertise, same knowledge, they are not going to provide an assisted sales process, let's say this way. They want something more black and white underwriting, something more understandable, something more simpler in terms of the insurance product that they are going to sell. So this was the second item in terms of let's discuss which is the product that we are going to distribute. The third one was about customer experience. And these companies in particular, they are very much interested in providing a customer journey, a customer experience that is fully embedded in their experience. So they don't want to get any kind of disruption. They don't want to add any particular service that is going to provide a different customer experience than the one that they are providing in their main product. So it needs to be a seamless integration in terms of customer journey. You need to provide the same expectations in terms of NPS, in terms of customer servicing. And of course, you don't need to provide to them with additional load or with complaints related to the claims handling process or to the after sale process. So this third topic was as well important to convince them or to consider even the distribution of insurance. So we realized that these three topics needed to be covered, and we provided we defined the proposition to go to these distributors to say, look, you have a plug and play proposition in terms of technology. These products are really thought to be distributed on your channels, and you will not have any complaint because the customer experience will be completely seamless and integrated in your customer channel, which means embedded insurance in the end. Something that it goes to that direction. And this was the rationale and the starting point of the company.
So make it easy, but it's still complex after all. So on the other side, same thing, right? Incumbents, insurers. What do you think, and what did they underestimate about embedded insurance?
Well, I think that probably they didn't underestimate it, so they didn't pay so much attention to that. So, and I would say the main reason is because the existing business is so profitable. So this is clear, something that they are paying attention to the existing business because the business they have, it's a renewal business. The portfolio is quite large. It's quite profitable. So starting a new adventure, which requires heavy investment in terms of technology, redefining insurance products, and going for a different legal scheme in terms of compliance, let's discuss it, firstly. So let's see, how big is the market? The volumes that are expected are really the ones that everybody's talking. So as you may know, the insurance industry is quite conservative in approaching these new adventures because
no. I mean that must be a Spanish thing. I mean,
I don't think so. Honestly,
I mean, Germany, it's just like, you can't hold them back. And don't get me started on Switzerland.
But there is a rationale for that, and I think that it's very understandable. No, so in the end, if you have a very profitable business, let's discuss about that. No.
And actually, one of the hardest things for me is to convince them that you actually, more often than not, have to build a book from scratch. And this has not been done overnight.
Yeah, that's true.
Countries. So that is, for me, this one assumption I had about embedded insurance that has proven unrealistic in practice. What about you? What is this one assumption you had about embedded insurance? It was unrealistic and you had to make changes. And what were these changes?
I would say there are two main unrealistic assumptions that we got.
Okay.
The first one was considering that many companies, they had connectivity, APIs, web services, something that you could connect, and that you could really use any insurer provider to develop an embedded insurance program with a distributor. This is not going to happen because in the end, what we found out and what we realized is that many insurers, they had some APIs for let's say, the main core products, household, motor, life even. But for additional products, the level of connectivity or APIs was not very relevant. And so this was stopping or struggling the possibility to develop embedded insurance programs with existing incumbents, with traditional players. This was the first assumption that was really unrealistic. And the second one was to consider that any particular distributor could do embedded insurance, and this is not true. So you need many elements and many considerations before launching or before even considering to launch an embedded insurance program with one distributor. And basically it's about volumes, but it's also about commitment. And this is something that we realize as well. So this is a business of large volumes. If you are working with large volumes, this is going to work. If there are some other items, of course, that you are accomplishing, but not everyone could really play in that field.
I would love, before we go into this tech broken assumption, which I've seen so many times. That's why we, for example, teamed up with Nick's company here and there. The distribution angle, I think, is also an interesting one, because that is one where also the incumbents come into play and say, well, no, we can do this. We have been good at distribution basically our entire life. So could you just please go a little bit deeper into why this is not the case, and what has to change actually, or what has to be there to be good at what it takes?
Well, actually, I read one of these reports in the industry related to the embedded insurance field in particular, in which was the point that was really struggling the most, and the pain point. And it was about that. It was about dealing with insurance companies that, in most cases, they don't have the insurance products, they don't have the language, even the culture of dealing with the distributor, because they don't clearly understand what the customer is requesting. They don't have the technology, and they have an organization which is quite complex to understand with who you need to deal with. So in the end, these are large organizations. If you need to speak with the guy from legal, the guy from compliance, the guy from IT, the guy from product, So it's a complex way of dealing just to build an embedded insurance program. In the end, our companies are concentrating this process. We are providing the three things, let's say this way, and we are making easier the path to deal with the insurance. So in the end, we are a middle layer that is enabling and is making easier to deal with all kind of insurers, traditional insurers, but also insurers that are more prepared in terms of technology, product, or even communication. No? So based on what we said in terms of the unrealistic assumption of APIs connectivity, and you ask about which was the decision that we made, no? And what we decided is to build up our own system. So we built up a core system, and we started from the product factory configuration. So in the end, what we got is to not having dependency on the level of connectivity of the traditional insurers. So we were acting on behalf, and we were able to provide the end-to-end capabilities to fulfill all the features that the distributor was requesting to develop the embedded insurance program.
Would it be fair to say that, and I think you've mentioned it, that one of the challenges for a larger organization, which is very organized by function, you have sales, you have product, you have underwriting, you have legal, you have tech, you have compliance, is that all of these things actually at the design, they create interdependencies. Not always exactly at the same time, but whether or not your partner is actually a regulated entity, whether it's a group contract, whether you allow, it's a voluntary contract, all of these things, they bleed into the design principles of everything else, and that it needs that kind of holding everyone together to not lose sight of all of the kind of complications, and you cannot just kind of go through all of these different paths. And I think that requires a certain level of authority to make calls before everyone also agrees, because it would just go way too much back and forth. And I think that's a certain level of experience that then helps you as you go through. In the beginning, you stumble through these things, and it's like, why hasn't this been solved? Why hasn't this been solved? And I think that then gives you a level of right to play, in that it's like, why would a intermediary be required between ideally two large partners, and I think it's that. And what you've mentioned, I would assume that when you said you are acting as a middle layer, but in order to be independent of insurers to underwrite the products, you need to become independent, and thus have the entire operating insurance value chain potentially, right?
That's true.
Yeah, I think that's what we've seen everywhere, and you basically sidestep or augment depending on the product, I guess, whatever your insurance partner provides, but you need to be able to promise to a distribution partner and abstract that complication dealing with an insurance company away from them.
No, that's the point, and clearly there is a significant part of the design phase of the embedded insurance program, because it's not straightforward about what are the different needs, and who needs to cover the different interdependencies. So, for instance, we are running some programs that are covering different markets, different countries, different languages, different regulations, and at the same time, for instance, we are using different ways of payment. So, you may know, when you are working with a retailer that is using an e-commerce platform, and at the same time they are using stores. So probably the payment gateway that you're going to use in one particular channel is different than the one that you will use in the liquidation process, and the billing is also different, in both channels. So you need to be adapted to design how the program is going to work, and how your operational system is really adapted to support that. So when you do that, and let's make this loss in translation to the insurance company in a much more digestive way, this is going to it's going to make it easier.
Yeah, I would, and I think as whoever's holding the commercial discussion, you need to be able to understand what alternatives you have, and if all of a sudden you cannot touch the payment system or something, but that's something that your other partner does, then it's
correct.
Yeah,
but you did touch other parts of the tech stack. So one point that was interesting to me, you said, well, you build your own? And when I was confronted with this question, um, do you actually build it internally or get it from outside? For my MGA, basically decided get it from somewhere else. And I think there's always this balance, right? Technical ease of use, but also you have to do a lot for your partners. They're individual products. Nobody wants an off-the-shelf product. And distribution, we already covered this. So how do you balance this technical ease of use on the one hand side with a need for partner-specific products, features? Do you have an example here for me?
Yeah, look, we decided to build it internally because in the end, this is the core of the company. This is what we are selling. So we are commercializing the technology mainly. So, and we build up in API first architecture with microservices. Now that is allowing us to fulfill all the different customer needs. So, based on what you said, for instance, our solution can be considered something like a standard for MGA. That we already developed the modules that are needed for an MGA. No, specifically we develop also the modules for reinsurance, co-insurance, binder capacity, controlling the limits, all the borderos. So all these different modules that are part of what an MGA in particular need, they can get it from us because in the end, no, the architecture is allowing ourselves to provide this kind of capabilities. So in this trade-off that you mentioned, we want to get to the balance. So in the end, you have a solution that is you can configure fully in depth. So it may provide a plug and play proposition for anyone, but at the same time you can configure your business case or your business or your use case in a very specific way without doing software development. And I think that this is the beauty of the solution. So in the end, no, the modules are already up and running and configured, and the level of customization can just be done in a configuration process. So we are not doing this ad hoc customization by doing development. So we are just applying this design phase of the embedded insurance program, how it's going to work in the product factory. And then once this is done, which are the modules that we are going to use? Are we just talking about onboarding, policy admin, first notification of loss? Are we going to integrate with a TPA, billing, receipts, renewals, whatever? So in the end, this is just about cherry picking, no? Which are the modules that you are going to use? So I think that we got this trade-off about not having something that is purely strict that you cannot move with something that can be easily to configure to your specific business needs without getting into a huge development, because we don't do development at that point.
I think I'm not sure whether you might be selling yourself short a little bit, because there are, and I speak from experience, that tech stack is a commodity that you describe. I could list you 10 companies, my company included, that and that might not have been, I mean, we've been at it, 6 years is a long time. And I'm also not saying who knows what happens with Claude Code, and I'm not saying that things don't change, right? Around make or buy, which is, so you need to make a choice at the time that you can make the choice and then get on with it and live with it, right? Rather than waiting for a perfect window. But today I think you might be selling yourself short, because I would say the technology is there, especially in embedded insurance. You actually need less than some of the complexities of, and you could also run a 300 million MGA book with 3,000 brokers, and that comes with its own complexities. Just like every not just because you have an insurance license doesn't mean that you have the same model. I think embedded insurance has certain nuances to it, but that makes it somewhat easier, right? Being good at embedded insurance doesn't mean that you make a multi-country motor product well, and you could run that as an MGA. So I would just kind of ask maybe two follow-on questions. First, well, number one, do you agree? I mean, that's just my statement, just because you said you're a technology company, and I think you probably have something else on top of that. Number two, at which point what would have to be true for you to change your opinion? Not just if someone else was in a similar situation. And Yeah, maybe let's start with those two questions.
I would say, of course, what we are adding to the tech layer is the industry knowledge and the knowledge about the embedded insurance programs, which is very relevant. It's not something that we may undervalue, because in the end, no, the solution has been built based on the knowledge of the different business cases and the different requests that we have got from customers. So in the end, we are covering the full spectrum of the variety of cases that you can get in the embedded insurance world. So just for instance, no, we have introduced more than 50 different insurance products in terms of line of business, several countries, several integrations with different insurers. So in the end, no, what you got is something that is ready to go platform for doing embedded insurance. And when we decided to build up the rest of functionalities was because I think that embedded insurance at the very beginning was about onboarding. And this was clear. It could be seen something easy, let's say this way. In the end, no, if you have an API widget or some kind of connectivity to place the solution at the right point in the right moment, that's fine. But this is not just about that, because in the end, these kind of customers are requesting also that they want to get the information in real time, no? That they want to serve the customer and they want to know if this customer has just purchased insurance just 1 minute ago. No? That you need to integrate with the TPA, because in the end, if the customer is calling for a claim, this is information that needs to be there at that time. No? So that once they have sold, let's say, the electronic device, they can cancel it, no, at that moment, and they can decide to withdraw. And these processes need to be fully engaged with the core product. No? So in the end, the embedded insurance platform is based on the knowledge of the different cases and based on the knowledge of the market. So it's not just about tech, as you said. I fully agree with that. So it's about how we have implemented, no, this knowledge in the way that the operational process is working in the system, and with, of course, no, the level of integration, security, privacy, and so on, that these are commodity for everyone now. Okay, based on that, what we see is the technology that the insurance ecosystem now is requesting. It's going particularly in the go-to-market activities. Of course, there are many areas, but as we see in the field that we are moving, let's say this way. What we realize is that the companies, generally speaking, they have systems and legacies that they are quite solid and quite robust in terms of managing data and managing, the back-end process. But in terms of the go-to-market and the layer to approximate not only for the embedded insurance, also for the distribution purposes, this is where you need more agility. And this agility is something that can be provided with this layer, of technology, adding the relevant knowledge, that we have applied based on the expertise of the different experiences.
And to the second question, would you, if you had I mean, I don't golf, right? But let's imagine you golf, and there's a friend, and they'll say today, okay, we're going to launch embedded insurance because we have access, product, we kind of get it. What would you ask them to kind of go, in this situation, you should build your own technology. In that situation, you could procure that technology, granted that, but check for these 3 things or 5 or whatever it is. If you had that learning.
Of course, I would not recommend to build their own technology to anyone now that we have some market standards and technology that is already developed to support embedded insurance programs, and that have been built based on this knowledge. Because I would say the architecture needs to be well developed from scratch. Otherwise, when you get to the point that you need to do some specific things, you can't do it. So you need to really clearly rethink about this. Is
so maybe don't get Guidewire or Duck Creek for your.
Of course not, because
no, but these are questions, Jordi. These are potentially.
These are the robust platforms that we discussed earlier. So this is absolutely fine to manage a large insurance company, for sure. We'll never get doubt about that. But I think that the flexibility, the agility that we are now discussing about the broad variety of cases that are bringing the embedded insurance world is something that needs a specific knowledge and time to market that all these platforms probably will not be as competitive as other solutions that have been developed with the knowledge of the embedded insurance program. At least this is our experience so far.
I like this golf example. So you're playing golf. You tell them don't take Guidewire or Duck Creek, but do you need? And I want to come back to this balance thing we touched before. When would you say, well, you need a new product, and when would you say, I don't know, let's take cancel for any reason, just take a off the mill product, off the shelf? How much customization does have to go into the product for every partner, or doesn't?
Into the product, meaning technology?
No, into the product, into the insurance product, what the distribution partner in the end wants to market.
Yeah. Well, in our experience, so there are many elements to make it work. So it's not just about, as we discussed, technology is about customer experience, it's about insurance product, it's about pricing, it's about engagement, it's about sales engagement. Is about the commitment of the organization, understanding that this is strategic for them. This is clear. I think that this is one of the items that we discuss the most with them. If insurance is strategic or not, and how can you prove that? If this is strategic, we can discuss about all these different topics. And insurance product in particular, I wouldn't say is the most important one, but also I would say it's quite relevant. But in the end, there are, I would say that there are elements that are more critical in terms of developing the embedded insurance experience for a distributor than the insurance product. That is something that you can later adjust and decide if this is really fitting with your customer expectations, with your customer need. But in the end, more or less, I would say the range of products that have been adapted in the last times to this kind of distribution are accomplishing on a range what the customer is demanding. But in terms of user experience, we went through with one partner to a consultancy project just to identify which were the different topics that were really harming the attach rate and the experience of the customer, and most of them were about UX, communication, the level of information that you were providing to the customer at the moment of purchase. So pricing, the long list of portfolio of products that were in the offering at the same time. So there are many factors that you need to go through just to detect what's not going to work. But I would say insurance product is one of them, but it's not the only one.
I think let's dig into that part, because it feels in my experience it's one of the forgotten parts, especially when you're kind of coming at it from an insurance angle. It's almost like, okay, we've designed the product. Well, it's then the partner's point to sell the product. I mean, that's what they get the commission for. Lo and behold, insurance is a very interesting beast to place. And just because you can sell, I don't know, Snickers or something else, that doesn't directly translate to it. So do you have a framework you can go us through to say, or some quick wins, or however it's like, listen, if you kind of go to this thing, whatever activation, attachment rate conversion, how do you approach that topic? Also, not just at the go live, pray, and then let's go into activation, but potentially as a checklist to say, unless my partner is willing to commit to these things, you mentioned partner commitment. One of them is to do something with the product that we provide them, where you would say, this is like some hard red flags, because it just drives down the conversion. And even if you have 100 million customers or whatever that is, if it's 0.00001%, that's not super attractive.
No, clear. So we have this checklist, and we work through based on the experience.
Can you send that checklist?
I wouldn't say
we'll send ours
confidential.
back.
We can share some of them, but of course, I think that partner commitment is key. I would say is the killer one. So this
but
is
on what?
crucial.
On what dimension? So what would you, or what would be a red flag? Because everyone's it's slightly different. I mean, you know, I have some ideas, but it would just be
when you see that if the partner is not even considering to make any investment in terms of cost, resources, time, governance, just to make sure that the insurance program is going to fly and it's going to produce the expected volumes. If you see within the organization, even a large organization, we want to do embedded insurance distribution, but there is no one behind. There is no responsible. There is no commitment. There is no objective in terms of a goal. It may not work because in this large organization, you need someone who is pushing, fully engaged, committed specifically to that purpose, to that objective, to that goal. If this is going to happen, this is the first check. Then the rest are coming. Are you going to make an investment? So your IT department will make the adaptations that we need to make it fly, because in the end you need something from them. You need somehow the integration in the customer journey. They're going to do through an API. They need to move internally with the different areas, with legal, with compliance, with business, whatever. So you need this. So the first time the partner engagement and the partner commitment is clear. And then I would say that the second one, this must be something strategic in terms of volumes, because in the end, if you're going to do something that is irrelevant in terms of business compared to the revenue of the organization, it may fly the first year, but we will not have any kind of continuity. No one will push forward if this is not relevant in terms of business, profit, volumes, whatever. And finally, I would say this must be relevant for the customer, and this is where the product takes place and makes it important. So in the end, even if the UX is good, even if there is someone behind and there is a commitment on that, if the product is not relevant for the customer because the engagement with their core product is not natural, is not something that flows, and it's something that it can be considered that is adding value to their core proposition, it might be seen like you are doing a pure cold cross-selling, and this is going to have a clear pushback on that. So it must be something that has a clear engagement in terms of a natural flow within their core product. You cannot sell with sneakers. You cannot sell motor product for insurance. So this is something that is crashing.
I would say that there are plenty of examples on the point of transaction, point of need. Travel, mortgage, buy a car, etc. What's your experience in the after sales of something? Like, can you build? So, for example, I know that Spanish telcos are not so bad selling not super telco related products to telesales, like life insurance. That's not a direct match that I would have bet on. But clearly they're doing something there. And I guess, what is your experience with success factors or in general about after sales, telesales, cross-selling, after that initial, let's say, transactional product has been serviced and optimized for an attachment rate?
The same. I would say the experience is not quite good. Of course, there are some successful examples of after sales and cross sale, but I think that we should consider those examples as, let's discuss about an insurance sales organization that works efficiently and that they know how to do it.
Have you found one?
So, no, but no. In the example of a telco, let's forget for an instant that this is a telco. They have a customer base that is quite skilled in terms of that they have segmented and they know how to address it. and they have a sales organization that is well prepared to do that, and they have the tools, and technology to approach them easily. So then I would say this is not purely an after sales or a cross sell related to the first transaction, because in the end we are discussing about sales distribution organization that work efficiently. When we go to someone who is doing, let's discuss about this transactional process in embedded insurance, and then afterwards we can do cross sell, or we can send the customer to this marketplace that we have in the URL. This is not going to work. This is not going to work, because in the end, again, this is an add-on or an additional process that someone thinks that can be efficiently leveraged on what you have defined for the embedded insurance program. So let's do this too. So this too is not going to work, because in the end, there is no, again, commitment, objective, sales organization behind. So this is just a kind of an add-on. And if we put it as an add-on, it's not going to work. So this is our experience. Okay, but of course, cross-selling, upselling in sales distribution organizations are really working if they do it properly. If they focus on that with the customer base.
So if we put the things together, insurance is complex. There are many things, and I learned most of them are on your magic list. You're not yet willing to share with us. And
Okay.
and partners have to be committed, but they don't have to be committed only. They also have to be, that was what the two of you just discussed, right? They have to be good at sales organization, sales activation, all this. Has it ever happened to you that you try to onboard a partner, they have relevant customer, relevant transaction streams, but in the end, it just didn't go as expected? And you say, well, in the end, they were committed, but they just didn't have what it takes. And can you give an example what broke in this case, and what did you change?
Luckily, we have several failures that where we learned a lot from all of them, and some of them were committed, but they were committed until one point, that they could not decide. If you are speaking with large organizations that they go through programs of embedded distribution, and the guy who is running the embedded distribution, they can play some decision-making process until one point, but there is something that they can't control. And I give you an example. We partner with one organization with large volumes of transactions, and it was not working, and the attach rate was really low. And we realized that the UX and the technology that they were using was failing continuously, and not that the insurance offering was sometimes dropping, and they couldn't control why the insurance offering was not placed properly. And this was a decision that needs to be done in corporate center. And corporate center was in the headquarters of the organization, and they couldn't control on that. So in the end, if you don't manage what you need to make it fly, so you are struggling to accomplish the objectives that you have set. So it's important that there is no need for IT development in the partners organization, but there is a need for controlling and overviewing what's going on. And if they make any change that is implying that this can probably drop or can't work properly, they need to be aware of that. So they need to continuously be monitoring and controlling and doing the follow-up that the program is running. And in this case, they were committed, but they didn't have the tools to control that.
So I would kind of paraphrase. Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
No.
I just have one short follow-up actually on this one. Because I also made this experience, decision-making of your partner is extremely important. It's not only the decision-making in the insurer, which is sometimes a bit different than by a customer-facing partner organization. But do you, in the list or elsewhere, explicitly look at the decision making? Are they fast? Are they reliable? Do you have direct contact to the decision makers, or is this something you get a gut feeling of as you move along?
No, usually we are dealing with the guys who are making the decision process, and I think that this is one of the secrets with the ones that are really working and being successful. So in the end, I think that also in these organizations that are very much focused on customer servicing and no UX experience, they care so much about that. So the guy who is dealing with you is the one who will take care that everything goes properly. Yeah.
Is that something you learned the hard way? Or you paid attention to this from the very beginning?
No, we paid attention from the experience.
Okay. So this is not something you made a mistake early on. However, as you mentioned, right, there were a couple of learnings, couple of mistakes. So if you had to go back and do only one thing differently at Weecover, and especially at the early product development, at your go-to market, what would it be and why?
I think that I think that this with startups and scale-ups, it's always happening. No, when you have run 5, 6 years and 7, and you said, well, there are 2 years that I could streamline, no, because we made some mistakes at the very beginning, and particularly I would say we focus at the very beginning in all kind of distributors, and we didn't select them so well in terms of expected volumes, commitment, no, what we discussed, and we invested so much money and time in some deals, no, in some partnerships that didn't fly, but we learn a lot from them, and we
Why
learn a
didn't
lot
they
about.
fly? Were they too small? Was it
Some
scale
were
an
too
issue?
small,
Okay.
and they didn't have scale. Some they were very promising in terms of selling embedded insurance, and in the end, you noticed that they just wanted to add an insurance proposition to look better to potential investors, and in the end, there was no clear commitment in selling insurance. But in the end, no, the proposition was more valuable because they integrated an embedded insurance solution. So there were a range of a variety of different experiences, but I would say volume, no partner commitment. We realized and we found out about that, and also dealing with some insurance companies that were not prepared to get into this world. Not that we were trying to connect with them using the connectivity they had at that time. That was really complex. So that's why we
But that was on
decided
the
and we
carrier
realized,
side now, right? Carrier side,
yeah.
okay.
So
On
that's
the
why we decided to do it on our own.
On this partner distribution partner side, I'm currently trying to figure out what are the right KPIs to figure out early on, is this gonna fly or not? Do you have some hints from your longer experience on this? What are at least the yellow flags, the orange flags? Where do you have to look and either correct or drop later on if it doesn't change?
Well, I would say there is one that when you recall what's working with the ones that are successful, they all want to implement quickly. The ones that are successful, they want to go fast. The ones that are doing low performance, they didn't have so much urgency in terms of launching the proposition. And this meaning that this is something that it's nice to have, but it's not core strategic for them. So speed is quite a KPI to follow up to early on, to understand, okay, these guys, they want to move fast. This is going to work. Usually, it may not be the case, but usually this is a pattern.
I think that's an interesting heuristic because, speed, as you said, has a certain level of urgency, attention. It also means that you can then afterwards likely adapt faster rather than having a one shot. And that conversely means it's being fast is not only about faster than your competitor, but it's almost a pre-selection mechanism for good opportunities to begin with, rather than and I'm not saying that there aren't established affinity programs with large RFPs, but then you have a different problem, right? Then you have the scale thing, but then people squeeze you on the margins, and you kind of have that problem. I think thank you for that unlock. I hadn't thought about it exactly like that. That was really nice punchline, if you like, at the end. Jordi, before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share? Any shout out, any shameless plug, for our viewers and listeners before we wrap this very interesting conversation up?
No, as you said, and I declare myself also an insurance lover. So I love the industry. I'm very highly interested in how this industry is moving forward. Also, the impact of the AI, in the different parts of the value chain, and in particular in embedded insurance, I think that there is sometimes the storytelling about this was very promising and the volumes expected were trillions. We really believe that this is a huge market, that embedded insurance is about linking and engaging more and more the insurance to the rest of the services and purchases and transactions that we do in our day-to-day business. So in the end, everything is connected, and it will be more and more connected. What it needs to be is quite relevant for the customer. So in the end, the customer is the one that is deciding if I want to purchase it, I want to attach it, and it needs to be something relevant for them. And this is about using the technology, the expertise. We discuss about these two things. This is not just about technology; it's also about knowledge. This is a different distribution. When we discuss about, there are people who knows about how to manage brokers or how to manage agents. You need to know about how to manage embedded insurance. It's quite a bit different, because the distribution is quite different. So I think that we in the industry, we have a group of people who are becoming experts in that field. We really believe that there is a significant chunk of business that is coming to that process, operational process, that way of distributing, and that in the end, this is about using the technology smarter, in a way that we probably haven't done in the past, and convincing the insurers that they don't need to build up their own solution, so they need to rely on the market solutions that have been already developed based on the business experience and the knowledge that we have got in these last times.
Awesome. Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Looking forward to seeing you guys in Barcelona, hopefully in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
I was just about to say, get your tickets. It's worth it.
Will do. Thank you.